Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Team Comp Tuesday, where every Tuesday we take a look at a different team in Genshin and what it's all about. And this week we have a personal team of mine that I really enjoy playing. Well, not personal team I didn't come up with, but it's a team I really enjoy playing despite it not being necessarily the best, but it's still a pretty good team. And it revolves around a concept we used a couple weeks back in the Layla team, which is the Sunfire interaction, which is something we'll get into later. But essentially, we still have Raiden's banner for another week, so I figured I wanted to do another Raiden team, and it was kind of either this or kind of just my open world default team, and the open world default team isn't nearly as interesting as this. And this is a team that got a pretty good spotlight, I want to say like 6 months ago or something. A couple videos about it popped up all over YouTube, but since then there hasn't really been much on this team. As much hasn't really changed with it, but it's a lot of fun, and it gives me another excuse to use Jean, who is one of my favorite characters. So, especially before the craziness that is next patch, as we have Alhaitham, Zhao, and Hu Tao. So I've got like at least 2 weeks of teams for each of them. So if I wanted to get a Sunfire team in now's the chance. And Raiden is a pretty good unit for this team. So this is a good reason to show it off. So let's get into it. Alright, so quickly before we go into a showcase, we're going to talk a little bit about what Sunfire is. So Sunfire is essentially the name of an interaction in-game between Jean's Burst and Bennett's Burst. So Bennett's Burst leaves this fire field on the ground, which then can be swirled up with Jean's Burst, which causes rapid ticks of pyro damage, which then can all be then be vaporized or hit with any other kind of pyro-based reaction for good damage. So why would you want to use something like this? Well, there's a couple advantages. One is that it also VV shreds at the same time, so it means that the pyro field will also do increased damage. This also means that Jean, since you want to build her for full EM anyway, for her own swirl damage and stuff like that, that you have high EM for those pyro reactions. Also, because she applies the pyro so fast, she will be the one triggering those pyro-based reactions. So her EM and stuff will greatly benefit it, the reaction, due to how fast it ticks. Basically meaning she is always the trigger for the reaction, or almost always the trigger. It's a pretty fun, interesting way to use Jean. I like it. I like excuses to use Jean. It can be a little annoying because it does mean you kind of have to play Circle Impact, but a lot of teams nowadays you have to play Circle Impact, so it's not that big of a deal in comparison. But yep, that's just kind of the generalization to what Sunfire is. Sunfire is essentially just that interaction of infusing the Jean ult with a Bennett ult that's already on the ground. Or burst, sorry, excuse me, I keep saying ult, I mean burst. With Bennett burst that's on the ground in order to apply very, very fast pyro application to be used for other elements or simply just for damage on top of it. Alright, and now it's time to go over the characters. I think first we're going to go over the two members of the core, the characters that actually trigger the Sunfire. Jean is built a little bit, actually quite a bit different than standard Jean setups. So that is something to take note of. This is full elemental mastery Jean. For weapons, Iron Sting is your best if you don't have access to Freedom Sworn. If you have access to Freedom Sworn, is actually a pretty good weapon for this team, and it does give your team quite a good amount of damage since it gives buffs to other characters. If you do not have Freedom Sworn and for some reason you don't want to use Iron Sting, Favonius is probably your next best option, just due to being able to then give particles to the other members of your team for their bursts. But since it is a craftable, I would highly recommend Iron Sting. You probably already have Iron Sting built for Kazuha or Kuki Shinobu, or there's a couple other teams that use this. So I would definitely... this is one of those weapons that I kind of think you should have, even if you don't use it all the time, just because it's good, and whenever you need it, you'll be glad you have it. Definitely don't build it if you can't afford it, but yeah. Artifacts are very simple. 4-piece VV set here with as much elemental mastery as humanly possible. Side note, getting any energy recharge you can on substats and stuff like that to help out with refunneling bursts and stuff like that is greatly appreciated. For talents, the only one that really matters here is her burst, as this is what will be doing the majority of her damage, but I personally would also recommend leveling up Gale Blade just because, and I have her normal attack leveled because I use her all the time, but you don't necessarily have to do that. Alright, and next up is the Pyro unit that makes everything usable. I know we go over I swear we go over Bennett in like half of these videos, but you know what? This might always be somebody's first, so, you know. Weapon, highest base attack weapon is your best option. Aquila Favonia is pretty good. There's a couple other, the 5-stars that have this high, like this number base attack. But basically anything with a high base attack is good. Skyward Blade. If you're looking at 4-stars, then you're looking at energy recharge weapons, stuff like Festering, Favonius. My personal recommendation for 4-stars, again, would be Sumeru Craftable. I do not have it, as I don't personally have a use for it, as I have Aquila. But definitely if you don't have Aquila, don't have Skyward, don't have some like 5-star sword you want to use on him, the Sumeru Craftable is quite good, as it has the highest base attack for a 4-star, or one of the highest base attacks for a 4-star weapon, while still having energy recharge passive, and it has a effect that gives some attack buff to your team on whoever picks up like the little item it drops. So just a little bonus on that, but both stats being good opposed to the like lower base attack energy recharge options is generally pretty good. Now for artifacts, Noblesse Oblige as usual. Ben is just like the best user for this set in general. Energy recharge on the sands, and then you have two options here: pyro damage and crit, or HP and HP. Personally, I go with pyro damage and crit due to the fact that you just kind of don't need all the HP for the extra healing. Nothing really does enough damage to you, and especially not in this team where Jean's Burst will also be healing your entire team. Even double so, you don't need the extra healing, but you could if you wanted to. Talents Burst is basically the only thing that matters. E is worth leveling, though, if you want to, at least a little bit. Due to you're going to use it in certain teams to funnel people energy and stuff like that, so it's worth having leveled up in the long term. Alright, next up, let's go over some of the kind of the last two flex slots for this team. Now, Raiden is a particularly good option for this, as again, characters in this team generally have a high cost burst, which works well for her. Also, characters in this team don't really need that much field time, so this lets her beyond field slashing. Perfectly good use for her, and she generally is one of the best extra slots for this team. Weapon, the catch is generally my recommended go-to. Other options include any crit damage or crit rate. Weapon, like the Deathmatch, Black Cliff, any of the 5-stars, anything like that. Favonius also isn't the worst if you have to use it, but the catch is generally pretty good, especially because this team doesn't really, This team does have Zhangling on it, so they won't be competing for it, at least while you're using this team, assuming then you aren't using Zhangling on the other side of the Abyss, but that's a different story. Artifacts, Emblem of Severed Fate, just her go-to best set. Electro damage on Goblet, crit rate or crit damage on the helmet, and then either attack or energy recharge on the sands. Generally, you go the inverse of your weapon. So if weapon is crit or attack, go energy recharge sands. If weapon is energy recharge, go attack sands. Now for skills, Burst and E are both good level ups in this team. Her Burst, you don't have to level up her normal attack as always, as her Burst has the damage multipliers for the slashes baked in. So that means you don't have to level up the normal attack. That's just a good... If you ever see skills like this, you need to know if you need to level up the normal attack as well. If it has the modifiers in the ultimate, you do not need to level up the normal attack as well. But if the modifiers are not in the ultimate or the burst skill, then you're going to have to level up normal attacks as well. And last but certainly not least is Xingqiu. Now you could use Yellen here, but if you don't have a high constellation Yellen, there is slightly less hydro application, which this team really likes the hydro application. So in general, I recommend Xingqiu. I think in general, if you're going to use only one of them, I tend to lean towards Xingqiu in most cases, as even if they do relatively similar damage, at least comparing like C0 to a built Xingqiu, a C0 Yellen to a built Xingqiu. Xingqiu offers much better defensive abilities, so I tend to favor him if he's the only one I use, if I'm only using one hydro. Weapon, Sack Sword is his best option. If you have to use another sword, either use something like a crit damage weapon or an energy recharge weapon if you have it. Favonius not too bad, but Sack Sword is generally built for him, so it's my general recommendation. Lion's Roar, again, actually not bad in this team either. If you can stack it, you just need to be careful then about needing a ton of energy recharge. Artifacts, he also wants an Emblem of Severed Fate set. I just don't have an extra good set of it laying around. Well, I don't have like an extra 5th set or whatever because so many characters need it. So I'm running 2-piece Noblesse 2 Hearted Depths, which is perfectly fine too. If you have better substats on a set like this, go for it. Sands, generally either energy recharge or attack. If you can swing it, attack obviously is more damage. I'd rather have more energy recharge than needed and not have to worry about it than miss a burst. So personally, I always over energy recharge generally for my Xingqiu. So energy recharge, hydro damage on the Goblet, and then crit rate or crit damage on the hat. For talents, level up the burst and skill equally, as they are both very good sources of damage. And as always, very similar to like a Raiden national team or whatever, because of how much pyro application is applied by the Sunfire interaction, you don't have to worry about, like, you can get both vapes and overloads, no problem. Alright, and we're gonna fight the target dummy here and give a rough rotation example. But just note, I don't think I mentioned this previously in the video, as you can kind of see whenever we were fighting the small Geovisceps, this team does tend to do better versus heavy enemies, as Gene's Burst and as well as the fact you're causing overload will push around smaller enemies. So I tend to really only use this team when either that's not an issue, especially because you want to keep stuff inside of the Gene Burst. So I generally only play this team whenever that's not an issue. But it's a fun team. And the rotation here is relatively simple to understand. The main thing is you just want to make sure you are hitting... You lead with Raiden stuff. Make sure you got your Pyro field down, and then you'll just drop Gene Burst, drop Gene E, go for Xingqiu E's in a burst, and then Raiden. Very similar things to what Raiden normally does. 3 slashes into a charge attack. And then you're just going to cycle back through and kind of just make sure everybody has their stuff back up. And once everybody has their stuff back up, then you can re-drop your Sunfire and go back to 3-year Jingcho and 3-year Raiden. So that's just a rough representation of the rotation. It is... Sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes it's a little annoying, but just keep at it. Eventually you'll get comfortable with it. I'm not super comfortable with it, because despite the fact that I do quite enjoy the team, this is a team that I sometimes have trouble finding reasons to play, but I do try to play it from time to time, as I do think it's fun, and I think it's a unique way to use Gene, and I like it when there's kind of unique and weird ways to use characters that still feel like, you know, you're still playing Gene, you know, still using her kind of the way you would in a standard setup. It's just now there's some extra interaction layered on top of it. But anyway, that's going to do it for me this week. The next month, like I said, is going to be pretty packed with stacked teams. We have 2 weeks of Zhao teams, 2 weeks of Hu Tao teams, 2 weeks of Al Haitham teams, probably. I'm also brewing a Chi-Chi team in the background. We might go for just a... It's probably going to be kind of disappointing, but I want to find a use for Chi-Chi, so I will find one, guys, I swear. But yeah, I hope you're excited. I wish you luck if you're rolling on any of the banners, or good luck getting Al Haitham. Next week, I'm not sure if we're going to be leading with a Zhao team or an Al Haitham week. If anyone has any preference, you can leave a comment. But there's a decent chance we'll lead with a Zhao team just to give me a week to build up Al Haitham, make sure I have him leveled and have his towns leveled, that kind of stuff, so I can give a good show off to him. But that's going to do it for me today. I hope you have a great day.